In the office, I'm Diana.
What's your last name?
I signed in full rain. Would you like to add? Would you like me to be up here?
Put it right there.
With the arrow?
Okay.
More of a transition than it is a.
Yeah. Diana. Thank you.
So welcome, everybody. My name is Jon Wittner. We launched the commercial division for our franchise group. It'll be 10 years ago, May 1st. So somehow I'm still surviving. Before I came to KW, I had background in development as a medical office building developer and a retail developer. And a couple of years before the crash, I decided that the partnership I was in left a little bit to be desired from my perspective. And so I left there, did some consulting, and then ended up in brokerage. And so here we are. So today I just wanted to give you guys kind of an overview and focusing on a couple of areas, and then kind of highlight the differences between commercial and residential and what it takes to be a successful commercial agent. So that's what we're going to try to do. So the first thing is, what are the different segments of commercial? Many of you guys probably know this, but we have retail, industrial, office, hospitality, which is basically hotel, motel, land, institutional, like for big universities or hospitals, restaurant, development related, and multifamily, 6 units or up. Multifamily below that is considered also residential in nature. Maybe it's 4 units or and down, I'm not sure. But typically it's commercial concepts, but by how the the realtor boards define it, there's a certain level that kind of goes either way. So,
Are you in Florida? Where are you based out of?
here,
This
office. Yep. I'm out of the office a lot. A lot of our most successful agents don't spend a ton of time in the office. Typically, you want to be out meeting customers, doing your lead generation, et cetera. And I'm a terrible example because I've been in it for more years than I care to admit. But for me, mostly I get phone calls or referrals without having to do a lot of lead generation. So I'm not a very good example when it comes to what a typical commercial agent would have to do to build a practice. So what creates value in commercial real estate? So it's a combination of a lot of different things. Obviously, just as in residential and in all real estate, location is key. You have to have a functional design and construction. You need to have product demand for what the real estate is configured. Good access is really key, especially when you talk about retail. If a site doesn't have good enough access, many retailers will reject it. Car traffic and foot traffic are also both in very important. Proximity to water can be very impactful, especially in the hospitality. Development opportunities, whether a property has either raise and complete redevelop or adaptive reuse, is when you see a building like this that was at one point a hotel, the Princess Martha, and is now an independent living facility. That's an example of an adaptive reuse. The natural, submarket, how in demand is a submarket? Here in St. Pete, it's about as in demand as you can get. This place has become white hot over the last 3 or 4 years. Took a long time to get there. I remember growing up, St. Pete was just known as the retirement town. And now people want to move from South Tampa to St. Pete because the quality of life and the arts and all the different restaurants that we have and the walkability is incredible. The natural elements, whether it be waterfront, mountains, etc., can also have a play. And of course, the income that a property derives or produces. You guys feel free to jump in with questions anytime you'd like.
When it
Also-
comes to land, I don't remember what is the demarcation where beyond the side, that particular size, it's no longer residential land. But does it become agricultural land or does it become commercial land if it's larger than certain size?
It's not really always based on size. It's really based on the use.
Okay,
So, and sometimes there's some crossover. So like you might have 10 acres out in a suburban area, maybe Carrollwood and Tampa or something. And it's eventually going to be used for residential because it's going to be divided up and made into a subdivision. But the process of purchasing it, platting it, subdividing, entitling it all, putting in all the infrastructure, that's considered a commercial function as development. It's called horizontal development. Whereas here in downtown, we deal with a lot of vertical development. So it's always important to know how properties are valued if you're going to be an agent of any kind, residential or commercial. And there are three primary ways that commercial property is valued. First and foremost is the income approach. What kind of return does this property generate? So net operating income and cap rates enter into this. We're going to dive into that a little bit deeper as we proceed. And the sales comparison approach, which is commonly used in a lot of the residential analysis and valuation. And so, in that respect, you may have sales comparison for a development land. Well, this property over here that we sold behind the Crest building, we sold it for $9.5 million an acre. So, well, there's a site two blocks over, but closer to the water. So you would make a comparison to it, make adjustments for time, and then also location and other development factors. But it's a similar process as what you guys go through valuing residential property with the sales comparison approach. And then lastly, there's replacement cost approach. This is used, but not as much as the previous two approaches. But it is especially good for understanding kind of where a baseline might be, because if you've got a big office building across the street and you've got people that are willing to lease in it, like the municipal services building across the street here, what would that cost to rebuild? It may not be perfectly designed for the current times, etc. But it's important to know what that cost is, because there's always a tipping point where the value is not going to go beneath a certain amount because it would cost X amount of dollars to replace it, and then make some discounts off of that for age and condition, etc. So I want to talk a little bit more in depth about the income approach. It is the primary approach that we use to value commercial property. We have something that's called the value equation. So value equals I divided by R. I stands for income, R stands for cap rate. So value equals the net operating income divided by a cap rate. So you've got a couple of different types of net operating income. For existing properties, typically using the existing NOI. So you would look back and say, okay, I need a profit and loss statement because I'm considering buying your office building. And you would look at that and then make some assumptions, and the cap rate that comes out of looking at that would be the purchase price you're willing to pay divided by the income, or excuse me, it's the other way around. So essentially, the other that is used for existing properties, but then sometimes you've got an existing property that maybe hasn't been managed well, maybe it hasn't been maintained very well. And if those things were done better, then the value would be higher. So you also have what we call a Proforma NOI. So this is assumption based. So we're saying, okay, if we took this building and we renovated it and made it ADA compliant and repainted the inside, replaced all the floral lights, et cetera, and make it close to as new condition as possible, people would probably pay more rent to be there. And that's exactly what happens. So many people use a Proforma NOI and compare the two. Or if they're doing a project from scratch, of course, they have to use a Proforma NOI. So they're assuming what the gross potential income is. So in this building over here, if it was before a renovation or it was, functionally somewhat obsolescent, you might have a rental rate of $15 to $20 a square foot, but if it was fully renovated, it could be $25 to $30 a square foot, just for example. So on Proforma NOI analysis, you take the gross potential income, you subtract the vacancy rate, which can be a range, usually ranges anywhere from 3 to 10%. A lot of them are 5 to 7%. And that's just basically accounting for the fact that people move out, tenants change, takes some lead time to release the space. Sometimes a whole new build out has to happen, et cetera. So you take out a vacancy factor of usually 3 to 10%, and then you take out the operating expenses. And those are based on market norms in a pro forma. So you would make assumptions, okay, if you bought this building and then renovated, you're going to assume that your real estate taxes are going to be higher. Insurance will be a little bit higher because you're putting money into it. It's going to be reassessed at a higher rate. And some other things like normal maintenance, landscape maintenance, et cetera, those things should be relatively similar. Sometimes they get lower. They're also, if you are updating with better systems, that might be more cost effective. So those are the two ways that you can look at net operating income. And then next page here. We thought this might be a little bit more pertinent especially for folks who are in residential, multifamily approach. So if we have a 12-unit building that gets $1,250 a month times 12 months, the $180,000 would be the gross potential income. So you would then take a vacancy factor because invariably there's going to be some turnover. You're probably not going to get someone in there immediately, and you're going to lose a couple months rent here and there. And then we're using a common market-based expense ratio of 35%. So that leaves $104,400. So in this example, the subject property is here in the heart of downtown St. Pete. It's not a brand new building, but it's not an older building. So our cap rate we're using is 5.5%. So we're dividing the net operating income by 0.055, and the result is just under $1,900,000. And so that would be an example of how you would do a simplified income analysis to generate a value In St. Pete, all product classes that are well situated are in fairly high demand. Multifamily is definitely in super high demand throughout downtown, but also throughout Florida. And so cap rates have gotten lower than in past years. And that's representative of there being more demand. And also cap rates vary somewhat similarly to interest rates. There's usually a spread. So like if you were going to borrow money to buy this building and you're going to put up 30% in cash and borrow 70%, normal methodology would have that there's got to be a spread that helps get you a better return on your cash equity. And so there's usually a spread of anywhere between 150 and 250 basis points above the cost of the financing. So in this, I basically used 0.055, which would be more on the lower end. Let's say you could borrow the money at 4 or 4 1/4 right now, and that may have gone up. I haven't actually checked many financing rates lately. Most of my customers have been buying cash. But that gives you an example of how the math works.
What's it 0.055?
That's the cap rate.
Okay.
So remember, we're dividing the NOI by the cap rate as part of our value.
On the previous slide.
Right, from this formula right here, the value formula. And we're going to get into a little bit more detail on what drives cap rates in the next slide. But this gives you a general sense of the basics that go into valuing a property through this income approach. Anybody got any other questions?
Well, if you have like the Proforma Noi, you have like the last year's NOI, and you're representing, you're putting out your listed property.
Mm-hmm.
So are you typically like picking up prices where splitting the difference for the listing price? Is that what you're effectively going to do?
Yes. In a average market or softer market, it would typically be based on the actual NOI. But on a hot market like in downtown St. Pete, parts of Tampa, et cetera, or really anywhere that is a hot in-demand submarket, then it's going to be between the two is likely where the purchase price will be ending up. If it's not a hot market, then the buyer's in a little bit better position to negotiate with the seller and doesn't have to give up his work to reposition the property and money and time, et cetera. But in a really hot market, usually you split the difference to some degree. So what makes up a cap rate in commercial real estate? And cap rate is often a term that is misused. People say, I want to buy at this cap rate, or I'm getting a cap rate of X on my property. The first statement is correct. The second statement, I'm getting a cap rate of X, is a commonly mistaken way to use the term. You're getting a return on your property. Cap rate is basically the amount that, or the number that from a numerical standpoint would be through the value formula. So if you're paying $2 million and you're getting $100,000 of income, it's a 5% cap rate on the sale of that. So we have a lot of different influencing factors. The submarket and the market demand, we touched on it already. The hotter the market, it will make the cap rate go lower and compress the spread between what you could borrow money at and what you would have to pay as a premium. Usually, they approximate the spread that's based on long-term interest rates. Many times it's a 10-year treasury that they use as an index. So if that 10-year treasury is 3%, 4%. You basically take that, and then on top of that, there's going to be a spread that kind of creates that ability to borrow money and get leverage. And so that spread again is usually between 100, 150 basis points and 250, but it can vary widely based on what's going on and the other factors. Available interest rates and financing also play into it. If there's hard economic times, there will be a bigger spread, meaning you're a lower value because it's harder to get financing. The creditworthiness of the tenants. So in an office building like the one we're in, if someone is going to buy it, they're going to do a very deep dive into analyzing the tenants that are involved. How creditworthy are they? Are they going to pay their rent reliably or not? And that all goes into what someone is willing to pay, and therefore the length of the lease terms. So if you had the same retail center and the rates were the same, and they all had 2 years left on the lease terms, or one across the street where there were 10 years left on the lease terms, I think everybody would probably agree that there's more value in the longer lease terms, as if you were in the buyer's seat. And that is definitely a big part, especially when you look at retail properties. There's a lot of emphasis put on the creditworthiness of the tenants. So if you're comparing, a local unknown one-off restaurant in one retail center versus a Starbucks across the street with corporate credit, that's a big difference, because there's a lot higher likelihood that the one-off restaurant might go out of business, and then the owner's got to re-tenant and go through a lot of expense. So therefore, people are willing to pay more or lower cap rate, which the cap rate is an inverse relationship to value. So when you say lower cap rate, it means higher value.
So if you have something like, say, a Winn-Dixie or a Kroger, and we're trying to get the valuation for a strip mall, everything else remaining the same, it's just that you have Winn-Dixie in one and a Kroger in the other.
Yeah.
How much
What an analyst would typically do is they would look up the credit. So they would go to Moody's or Standards and Poor's or whatever the credit rating system, and do some research and say, oh, well, Winn-Dixie is BBB credit, but Kroger or Kroger is A-, and there would be a difference. And then beyond that, the other stores that are in the shopping center, they would also evaluate the creditworthiness of each and every one of them. And if it's a bunch of local tenants that really don't have as much of a track record versus, Starbucks, Walgreens, McDonald's, all these making up, those are, very established well. So people will pay more for a center with more solid tenants. So what kind of demand is there for the product type? With the pandemic, what do you guys think happened with office space? Demand went down. Now we've seen a lot of resurgence, but in the height of the pandemic, values for office buildings like this one were down pretty much 10 to 20%. And then things have recovered, but it's still a segment that many people feel, with all the technological changes and people working more out of their houses or remotely and participating in meetings virtually, with all the adjustments that have been made, there's a lot of people that are not looking to be in the office ownership category. They're looking at other things that they feel are more safe, like multifamily, and to a lesser extent retail. Industrial has been really thriving, especially here in the state of Florida, because more and more companies have been coming down here. Our population growth has been phenomenal. if you like more people, but basically more need for logistics and warehouse and industrial types of space. There's the entry and other things come in. So make a simple example again, if the available financing was at 4%, all other things being equal, cap rates would typically be 150 to 250 basis points above, creating the spread. So 5.5 to 6.5%. So you could see an office building like the Crest building, if it had, say, $300,000 of NOI, you divide by 0.055 or 0.006 to get the value. And again, that would vary based on the quality of the tenants and the length of their lease terms, as well as the other factors, location. People will pay more for the Crest building because it's at the corner of 5th and Central. Pay a lot more for that, all the other factors being equal, versus an office building in Pinellas Park. It's just a factor of the underlying demand. Sales comparison approach. So this was a property that one of our commercial agents, Joe Esposito, was involved with some partners. And they basically upgraded the upstairs residential apartment units and substantially increased the rent. And they also replaced 2/3 of the downstairs retail tenants. But in this, we're really talking about more of the upstairs units. Well, what are people paying? So if you throw out cap rate for a second and say, okay, in downtown St. Pete, given a reasonable level of design and maintenance per unit, what are people paying for a residential multifamily unit per unit? And the answer to that is recently $150,000 to $200,000 a unit, which I might add is 50 to 100% more than they were paying 2 or 3 years ago, which is a function of how hot St. Pete is and also how high the rents have gotten. So we use the midpoint, and for the 12 units, they topped out on an income basis at $1.9 million. Sales comparison would dictate perhaps 2.1 million. Again, it goes back to demand. There's a lot of demand to be in downtown St. Pete. People are paying higher rent and they will pay more to own in downtown St. Pete. But lastly, the replacement costs. So it's basically going through the process of valuing all the different elements that would take to reproduce a building. So if you're starting from scratch, you would have to, of course, buy the land. In the soft cost category, design, impact fees, survey, legal, permitting, sewer and water fees, financing fees, appraisal, development fees, a whole host of different things are in that category. And then, of course, the hard construction itself. So typically, if you're buying and you have the option of buying a building that is already built, many times it's less expensive than building something from scratch. So the replacement cost is used, but it's not used as much as the previous two valuation techniques. So what do you need to be a competent and ethical commercial real estate agent? So our Realtor Code of Ethics says to practice specialized real estate brokerage, you need training and experience. So in KW here, we always encourage folks to stay kind of in their lane as far as their competency and always be ethical about what you do. And there's just a lot to commercial. It just says there's a lot to residential, and I would never attempt to go out and try and sell a luxury house because I wouldn't know what I'm doing. Similarly, There's a lot of local knowledge that gets into commercial real estate, and it really gets highly detailed. So you need, of course, your Florida real estate license. You need training. With KW Commercial, we have live and recorded training that's available, as well as other forms. Many times we have mentorship through our different commercial teams. And in the past, we've had a commercial mentor who worked with new agents. You need some experience. I learn things. I've been in this for over 30 years. I learn things every single day. And you many times need to be focused. If you're dealing in downtown St. Pete, it's a much different animal than if you're used to dealing in Brooksville, for example. A lot of different zoning requirements and regulations, lots of different rates as far as what people need to pay for lease rates for different types of products, et cetera. So a lot of local knowledge is part of the equation. So these are some of the different tools that we have, which are types of software and analytical tools. So for instance, CoStar is the main search engine. So if you're doing a role as a buyer's rep or a tenant rep, if you don't have CoStar, I'm not really sure how you can represent that you're doing an ethical job for your client. And the reason why is a lot of folks like to go on and look on LoopNet. LoopNet's another one of our tools. If you go on free LoopNet, many people think, oh, I can see the market. I can, you're seeing 35 to 40% of the market. So most classes I've ever taken, 40% is an F. If you have CoStar, you can see 99% of all the properties for sale. And you can also use the tool to look at off-market properties as well and find very important data to help you in your brokerage. Go ahead.
Now, isn't LoopNet bought out by CoStar?
It is.
So
But
why do they still, but both the brands still exist?
Yeah, because LoopNet is an advertising tool. So similar to your MLS, if you're advertising as a listing agent, a property for sale or for lease, you're doing it through LoopNet. But if you're searching, the tool is CoStar. And it's a lot more in depth than that. We could go on hours, we have trainings all the time for CoStar to help understand all the different capabilities, but that's the simple answer. And again, with LoopNet, the LoopNet that people commonly use, it's free, is only representing 35 to 40% of the market. So it's important to know that if you're representing a client and they're expecting you to bring them the best and you don't have regular access to CoStar, you're not doing them any favors and you're probably not being ethical. Other things that we have build out, RealNex, which is our new platform for KW Commercial that we're just transitioning into now. Prexy is another lesser known tool. Argus is a high-end analytics tool. It's typically used for larger properties that have dozens and dozens of tenants, like this office building or the tower, et cetera, where you're going to have 50 or 60 tenants that you have to do a very detailed analysis of. We have several real estate organizations that provide a variety of different functions for us. CCIM is pretty much the gold standard of commercial designations. CCIM stands for Certified Commercial Investment Manager. And some of the very best and most experienced of our industry are what they call pin holders, which means they've gone through essentially 5 weeks worth of classes and have to do, I think it's about $20 million before of production before they're eligible to take the test. So it's something that costs a lot of money to get the pin. But the nice thing is for people that are aspiring, you can participate in their events. similar to if you were a full PIN member. And we host many of those events as well. FIDCAR, it's our realtor organization. So many of you guys would have Pro as your for residential Pinellas Realtor organization. FIDCAR carries a similar weight and satisfies our realtor requirement, our realtor organization requirement. And it also has a number of tools that comes with it and different events. They have like the South Pinellas Pitch, which is once a month that many of us sit in on, where the agents who are members sit in together and ask, their hot listings or new listings. ICSC is the big retail organization. So if you're interested in either buying or selling or becoming involved in leasing or representing tenants, that would be something that you would probably want to get involved with. We have a large retail convention every year in Florida in August that usually hosts between 4,000 and 5,000 of the top deal makers in retail, but also includes bankers, private equity sources, a wide variety, landlords, and of course the tenants and the tenants designated representatives are all there too. And on a national basis, they have the national convention in Las Vegas, and that's usually 15,000 people. So a very big event. Urban Land Use Institute is an up and coming industry group that focuses, like the name sounds, more on urban issues in the downtown higher density areas. So our commercial group for KW Commercial has about 30 commercial agents. Most of them are here in Pinellas County. Our hub is here in downtown St. Pete, but we also have agents that cover Hillsborough and the 3 Impact KW offices over in Hillsborough. And we have, of course, 3 here in Pinellas. And these pictures are representative of some of the more notable transactions that we've brokered. The Floridian Reflection Condominium, which just broke ground, which is one of my projects. Artistry, we did the leasing for all the retail on the Artistry building. One of our more notable transactions just happened this past February, and we sold Sundial. It was our biggest sale and the biggest GCI event for our commercial group. So we're very proud of that. Kudos to John, my buddy, Joe Esposito, myself, and Jake Woolman, my partner, who were all involved in that.
How many of you were involved in that?
4 of us. So these are 2 properties that
Tell us more about that one. Tell us something about that.
Sure. So Sundial is an interesting story. It was owned by a local businessman and philanthropist named Bill Edwards. Sundial is a great location. He rebuilt it 8 or 9 years ago, maybe it was 10 years ago now. The tenants, though, that he put in there were not all as solid as you might hope. So many of you might remember Local Market. It's no longer there. Sea Salt is not in a great condition financially and have not been current on their rent. So what had happened is Mr. Edwards had Local Market, that entire space, which I think is 12 or 14,000 square foot. And he had some other vacancies, but he had signed a deal with the group out of Tampa, Armature Works, to take all that space and create a similar multi-unit food hall concept. Well, they signed the lease, and shortly thereafter, COVID started. And the Armature Works guys said, force majeure, I'm not moving forward with my lease. Force majeure is basically, strange things that can happen that no one can
Life
control.
circumstances that
Right.
are unexplainable,
Right.
beyond our control.
Beyond our control. And so the bottom line is whether Mr. Edwards had a case against him or not, it was going to take a long time. They have a ton of money. It would have been a huge fight. And he had a maturity on his loan that was coming due just a few months from when we got involved. It was supposed to be paid off 3 months after we got involved. We were able to put a local client of ours, Paradise Development Group, that purchased some other properties with us. They bought, put it under contract. They worked with the bank and got a little bit of extension time. So it was not a maturity default. And the buyer had a large 1031 exchange. And he knew that over time, it would be a great asset for the long haul, but he needed to bring in more creditworthy, more reliable tenants that would be better represented and more stable. So that's his plan. And he purchased it for 27.5 million. And he is currently leasing. So we take tenants over there and show them. I've got a couple of restaurant groups that are interested in going in there. But that was kind of the Reader's Digest version of the Sundial story. The other part of it from the brokerage standpoint, Jon Wittner was the broker for Ruth Chris when they originally put it in there. So when they're having trouble, one of the owner's advisors, one of our former mayors, said, you should call Jon Wittner. And so John got a meeting. He called a couple of us and said, I want you to come to this meeting. We need to throw everything against the wall. We have almost no time, but Bill Edwards is going to give us a shot. So what we did is we agreed that we're going to all throw our best clients at it. And whatever happens, we're going to, if there's a sale, we're going to split it 3 ways. And that's exactly what happened. Paradise was the group that ended up buying it. They closed in February, and we all got to split a really nice commission. So these 2 projects are vertical projects that my brokerage team was involved with. I'm heavily involved in development-related brokerage. We were retained by Christ United Methodist Church to sell their parking lot. They were in financial straits. We're probably going to dissolve if they didn't have some type of big liquidity event. And the city recommended me and Jake. So we won the business. We put together a contest, so to speak, of developers, had about 15 offers, drilled down to the top 7, and sold it to a gentleman named Dustin D'Annunzio. Dustin was a previous client of mine, and he's got a couple building sites here in downtown. And Dustin has a true mixed-use building here. This is a combination of retail, hotel, office, public parking, and the top section is multifamily micro units. Cool. So this will be 29 stories. The sale's a little old now. It closed in the end of 19, right before COVID hit. Thank goodness. And we also put together a public-private partnership between the church, who was the seller, the city of St. Pete, and the developer. That's the first time that's been done in 30 years. St. Pete has basically a philosophy that they want to add parking, but they don't want to have just a parking lot because there's not much land left in downtown St. Pete. So they would rather give the money to a developer to add it into the stack that they're developing for a higher density, taller building. And that way they'll get the benefit of all the real estate taxes, and they offload the management to the developer. So in this case, the developer got $8.6 million, which equates to $28,700 per space times 300 spaces. and got to keep 96% of the gross. So not a bad deal for the developer. This property will be built, and this one is supposed to start construction in fourth quarter of this year. He's on the property again since 19, but with all the changes and the fluctuations in construction pricing, et cetera, the city gave him some additional time to deliver the parking. So this property was with a group called HP Capital. We assembled 3 properties across from our clients, the Artistry Building, so just on the north side of First Avenue North between 16th and 17th, and just west of the is it called Vantage? I think it is the tall white one, 11-story. We started off with a small piece that was an extra piece from the Artistry development that they had to buy to get the property on the other side of the block to complete their block. But that other property was owned by the same owner, so he made them buy that as well. So we sold that, and then we worked with the developer to assemble the other 2 properties that were to the west of it to get to 7/10 of an acre. And now they're going to build a 19-story apartment building there in joint venture with a Chicago-based group called Tandem.
It's a joint venture building.
Yep.
What does that?
That means 2 groups are going together to jointly develop the project. So essentially, the group that we sold it to, they packaged it, entitled it, got the site plan approved because they have a lot of political ties and experience here locally. And Tandem came in with the heavy financial firepower, did all the financing, et cetera. So the original guys sold it for a few $1 million profit, and then a piece of the upside profitability of the development. This is our building where we did this transaction, which was a sublease. My partner Jake was working on a sublease and for this floor with a different client. It didn't end up working out. And at the time, we needed to replace our market center, which was in the building over on Beach or off of Beach Drive at first, the Plaza building. And so we ended up leasing this floor for $25 a square foot, which is about 25% below market at the time because it was a sublease. So the reason why a sublease sometimes is less expensive is someone else made the commitment and something changed and they no longer want to keep that commitment. So they're willing to bear a little bit of a loss so they could get rid of the overall obligation. And so that was the story of how we got this space. And proud of that. This is the church that we saved, and that's the lot where the 29-story building is being built. This is a Snell Arcade, as many of you guys know, is across the street. We've done several leases in here and also sold the McCrory's building right next to it a couple of years ago to Tricera Development out of Miami, one of our clients. This is the Cordova Inn. My partner Jake sold this last year. And then since that has also sold the same group 2 adjacent parcels where they're going to knock down some old decrepit buildings and build an 8-story addition to the hotel, which will add about 75 rooms and a rooftop bar and a restaurant. So it'll be really nice. This is our former OP Kevin Chadwick's building. This is one of my prouder deals. We purchased this building for $1.7 million in 2000. I think it closed in early 2014. We told him, you know, one day someone's going to want to build a building in your parking lot, and so he put about $300,000 into renovating the building, and he has had offers. The highest one recently is $12 million for this property over a course of about 7 years. So that's a very nice thing. Be really nice if we actually ever sell it. But and Kevin really loves the property and also doubles as the parking lot for the Floridian. It's his other asset that he owns there on the 600 block. So
Well, that particular one on the 600, that's been on the market for a while, because I remember I was looking for some commercial properties like months ago.
Mhm.
And so it's still not sold,
which one are you talking about?
the 600 one?
Oh, no, it's for lease. It's never been
Oh,
for
okay.
sale, actually. It's only been an off
Oh, for
market. We
lease,
got some
okay.
off market
So I was kept
offers.
on looking, that was like popping up when I was doing some research.
Yeah, we have available space for executive offices in here.
Right.
And also this piece right here, Kevin has been very particular about the retail. It used to be a pharmacy. Publix bought out the pharmacy and the lease years ago, so they wouldn't have competition for their
I
pharmacy.
don't know why I thought it was for sale. I guess I must have got it anyway.
No, it's not been for sale on the open market, but definitely got some very strong off-market offers. This is Everglades University, part of the Kaiser University group. I represented them to get this building, which is across from West Shore Mall in Tampa. Dr. Barbecue in the Edge District. This was an adaptive reuse. Used to be an industrial building with a metal company in there that did high-grade metal applications. And we visualized it as a two-story restaurant. And so far, it's done very well. A couple other projects. We sold this in South Tampa for a record price for Class B building. Clients in this building in West Shore and the Witner Center, which my uncle developed. I should say our uncle developed. And put some tenants in there in the past as well. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have about commercial or how our commercial group works. We're not actively trying to convert residential agents, but at the same time, many times residential agents start there. And if their heart and soul is in commercial, they could end up in commercial. We have a little bit of a different program than residential, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have about commercial brokerage in general or our group.
A lot of the folks that I know are looking less for anything residential, but more for multi-families and other commercial investments, warehouses, land to develop and whatever. Folks out of state, out of town, so on and so forth. So what's the best way to handle that being a residential agent?
So best way to handle that is to talk to us and find out who in our commercial group has expertise or focus or both, hopefully, in the product type and area that your client would be looking for. And we typically do a 25% referral to residential agents who refer business over to us.
So how do we know who has what focus? If you have such few agents, do you have a list that says?
Well, if
Jay is
you
good at
contact
that.
this guy or myself, this is Jay. Jay Wittner is my brother and also director of operations for our commercial group.
Like, is your real brother?
Yes, he is. And he can
Who's the
help you because he knows what all of our agents are doing and where their focus areas are. So for instance, if you're looking for a restaurant, you might talk to John Labuddy. If you're looking for a development site, you might talk to me. If you're looking for an industrial, you might talk to one of the other agents. But generally, there's plenty of business to go around. Most of our folks are pretty busy. And so, we want to make sure that it gets to someone, A, who has the expertise, and B, who also has the time to focus on it. And that's one of my failings is sometimes I don't have enough time to take referrals because I get too busy with some of the existing clients that I already have. But we really enjoy a great amount of support. Everglades University, there was an agent here that was referred to me He got a $48,000 referral fee for that lease, which is a 10-year lease on 25,000 square feet. So that's per hour. I think he had like 4 hours into it, so you guys can do the math. And it can be very lucrative, and you don't have to delve into something that you don't really have the experience to do adequately. So that's what we recommend. And if we don't have someone that is a good match, then we would help you find someone from another commercial brokerages that you could still refer to. And typically they would pay you a similar type of referral. But we have really good experience in most commercial segments. So most of the things.
And how does the KW commercial group compare with the other CRE groups in the Tampa Bay St. Pete area?
So I think overall in the Tampa Bay area, I was last year we were like 15th in size.
15th, 16th, the Tampa Bay,
Yeah.
we're the biggest, it's headquartered in St. Pete.
Yeah, we're the biggest in St. Pete. This has been our focus area. When we started this, we thought we might be more geocentrically located in South Tampa, but I fell in love with St. Pete for the second time and kept coming over here. And my partner ended up, Jake Woolman, living here. And so it just sort of mushroomed over here in St. Pete, and we lost some people in Tampa. So this has become by far our home office, if you will. All right. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you guys for coming in. I hope you gained some value and knowledge from this, and let us know if we can help you.
Thank you so much. Very insightful presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, hold on just a second. Let me see if I've got it. Not a good problem. Let me go run into my office and get one. Is that one of yours?
There's like,
Great.
there's.
Very good. I'll be right back.
Yeah, all good. Oh my God, I read that. So are you having
Close to the finish line with my speaker.
All right.
Okay, well, I have an appointment in 2, but it's still going on. I'll join.
Are you having a class?
Yeah, so I have to.
What are you teaching today?
Let's see, it's week 3 of classes. You've already been all of them, I think. What is it in?
Is it a night class?
No, it's a similar concept. So we have a PCU program for sport transactions. You get a trainer and a coach and a transaction coordinator. Deals. We have to make the first deal, and we have 10 required courses when they come to you. They rotate every month, just because we get licensed and then you have like thrown out to the wild.
Yeah.
So we get like night and have coaching, and then you have me as the trainer, and I actually show people how to use the MLS.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
There's a lot of, I know a lot of just.
Yes, exactly.
And Amber, if you would please add this and tell all these new regions. So like what I've been doing, we can't add a listing because of the bureaucracy from Stellar MLS. I don't know if you read my post on Facebook. Like the making me run around in circles for like days and days and days.
Yeah.
So it's so stupid.
No, every single realtor has done this. You're supposed to do that within
No,
days of getting licensed.
days of getting license was part 1 and part 2, the mandatory ones, right?
Yeah.
And then after that is this, and
That-
nobody bothered to say anything, so I never did.
We'll add it to your, actually, it's
We should
in
make-
your checklist.
I don't.
See. So we have a
Right for a
checklist.
rodeo.
Yeah, no, we have a checklist.
I mean, I might have missed it over there, but
You know, Paul's checklist, we took the checklist.
yes, I know it's written in size font and it's 57 pages.
No, it's right there. So Stellar tells you, we tell you, and we have it in writing.
This is good, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
What is it, John? Right?
Yeah, John.
John, they say.
One of the first
Yeah,
things that
good to
you
meet you.
need.
Figure them out. Let us know if there's anything we can help you. My cell phone is really the only number. Don't even bother. That's text or call.
Let me give you my trick.
Okay.
That's the way to do it right there. If you're in real estate for residential, you give it to these guys and get a commission.
Yeah.
That way you don't hit on it.
I already left it in my office.
Yeah.
Okay, don't worry, I'll take the.
One different.
Yeah.
higher.
Yeah, just text me your
Found it too, but we'll see if-
your contact or whatever. And
Yeah,
We'll
I
see.
have a very quick. So this is what.
You have to get one person that's worth it.
Exactly. Sometimes those are the best classes.
Get one person. Well,
That's it.
813-609-777.
That's it.
This is Jon Wittner. This is KWRD. And this is for 2022. And here, if you click on this link, you'll know everything that you care to know.
Okay, awesome, great. What do you specialize in, Mel?
I'm a college professor
Mhm.
and I moved into real estate because working at a kind of job in Florida.
Okay,
So
Mhm.
I'm living a couple of months, couple of years in Jacksonville. I figured I just like this little there.
good.
So I decided to do.
Well, KW is a great organization. You have so many options. And if you want it, they help you, with good education and training and everything. So,
Let's say today, tomorrow, 2 years from today, right, if ever, but like crossing the aisle.
sure.
Complicated.
It's not overly complicated. We do have a different system than you guys do. Our cap system, advanced is a little different. It's a similar splits, but we don't have a true hard cap. When you get to a certain threshold, you go to a 90-10 and 10% continues to go to the commercial. The other part before you cap or before you hit that threshold is split evenly between the market center and our commercial group.
What's commercial group?
So I'm one of the owners of our commercial group, along with Kevin Chadwick and Noah Ostroff. And we have some of our key folks that are also partners in that. And so we have our own entity similar to a market center. So we have some of the income that comes in from the company dollar basically goes to the commercial group and some of it goes to the market center.
When you say market center, that means.
The office here,
Office,
yeah, right.
But when you say the group, the commercial group, so
That's our
you,
entity.
Kevin, no.
Can I stop the recording, John?
Sure. Thank you.
Oh, was it all recording?
Yeah, I was recording in case. anybody wanted to- I don't know how many people want to watch that, but.
Okay. Next one, Brandon.